right, you guys, welcome. We are streaming live to Facebook. Welcome, Athlete Blood Test. We're so excited to have this interview. We've done this before. We actually have a recording of when I did an interview with them. Probably, I guess it's been 2 years now, actually, since I had my blood work done with you guys, which I probably need to do it again. So it's really, really cool information. If you guys want to go back and look at that, it's in the YouTube channel. But today we have the honor of having Anna Roby, who now works with Athlete Blood Test. So we're super excited to have you here. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you guys.
Yeah, I see you got your Wahoo kicker back there, or you got
your
bike set up.
I do.
So are you a triathlete as well?
Yes and no. I haven't done one in a long time, but I did get into them when I was 19, kind of in college, a little bit. But my husband is an avid triathlete. He's kind of retired now, but he got his pro card in 2016 and did Kona in 2019. So he's kind of he's taking a break now. But yeah, I'm well versed in the triathlete life.
Okay, so you understand the burnout factor and the overdoing it factor and why getting blood work is so important, right?
Yes, it doesn't seem like it at first. You're like, oh, that just seems so unnecessary. I'll just go to my doctor, it's fine. But once you understand what it can do for you, it is a total game changer.
Yeah, so cool. So how long have you been with Athlete Blood Test?
So I've been with them for about 2 years now. So I'm a registered dietitian. I specialize in sports performance nutrition. And I also have my PhD in physiology. So really I stay on top of the research and look at how do we get our bodies to physically perform their best.
Awesome. I love your background. Okay, good. So because you have a husband who is a overdoer triathlete, and then you have all this scientific background. So this is so exciting. I'm so excited to ask you all the questions that I have. But let's start with one of the big ones is inflammation, right? So triathletes so often have inflammation in their bodies and they think that it's normal and there's nothing they can do about it because they're training. If you train, you have inflammation, but that's not really true, right? So what are some of the markers when you do a blood test? We'll go over how the different levels and all that stuff, like kind of towards the end, but let's talk about like the important things that the blood work can tell you as far as inflammation.
Yes, so that's a great question. So you brought up a good point, which is that yes, when we're training, we are generating a lot of inflammation, right? So an Ironman generates about 10 years worth of oxidative damage on the body. Yeah. So there's a lot going on in there, and that's kind of an unnecessary, beast that comes along with it. But that doesn't mean we can't do anything about it. And so there are some practices that we can implement on a daily basis to try to calm that inflammation and keep it in check. Right. Inflammation in and of itself isn't bad. It's bad when it gets out of control and it's rampant and it's constant, right? So we want to have these spikes of inflammation. That's what gets our bodies to become fitter and adapt, is these, small inflammation markers.
Yeah,
exactly. But we want to make sure that we're keeping those in check. So if you're getting a blood draw and you take a look at the analysis, there are some key indicators that can show that you're starting to lean towards overtraining and that your body's really starting to struggle to recover from the demands that you're putting on it. And so there aren't necessarily individual markers that are going to be like the end all be all, but really you're looking at the holistic picture of the system. But you do see some kind of classic signs, like you're going to start to see a decrease in testosterone. You're going to start to see higher levels of other inflammatory markers. Higher CRP, or C-reactive protein, goes up, which is kind of an inflammation. Creatine kinase is a byproduct of muscle breakdown. And so if you're starting to break down a lot of muscle, that can be signs that there's a lot of inflammation going on. Right. And so we can take a look and see, like, how is your body doing relative to your training volume, your recovery, to see, is that inflammation or, kind of your training status, is that starting to hold you back? Right. And so, there's different ways that you can take a look at it, but we want to make sure that you're responding well to your training and you're not just putting yourself in the ground and not reaping the benefits of what you're trying to achieve.
Right. So you're just, instead of just digging yourself into a hole and not being able to get out of it, having the blood work every so often is a great way. So how often would you recommend like a blood draw for someone who's training for an Ironman and is taking a year to train? I mean, would you recommend one in the beginning and maybe one right before the race, especially if they're starting to feel fatigue and stuff like that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if you take a look at a training block, I would recommend getting one right before you're going to start training. So kind of in that off season. And this is to establish your baseline, right? So what are your natural levels when you're just kind of in a chill mode, right? You're not, taxed from training, because everyone is different. And
Yeah.
there's obviously a range of what's ideal, but maybe you tend to be a little higher in some things and lower in others. And that's okay. That's just your natural tendencies. But we want to make sure that we capture that. So when we look at subsequent, blood draws, that we can see relative to your previous, where are you at? Because if I only have one blood draw for you and something's really high, maybe you're naturally just high in something.
Right.
But I wouldn't know that looking. I might be like, oh my gosh, your training is killing you here because this has shot up. So it's really nice because it starts to build value over time. You start to see patterns throughout kind of different blood draws. So at the beginning to get a baseline, and then when you start to really ramp up training. So if there's kind of a big training block, that would be another time to see how are you responding to the training.
Right.
But if you're like, I'm on a tight budget, I can only do, maybe 2, I would definitely recommend the baseline and then 6 to 8 weeks before your A race, whatever that is for you.
Yeah.
So for the Ironman. And the reason is that gives us time to take a look to see where you're at. So if you're not in that ideal range for all your markers, then that gives us 6 to 8 weeks to fix that, right? So your body is like physiologically primed to do your best.
Yes.
And so we're not trying to scramble, because otherwise, if you get a blood draw like a week or 2 before, the race, you don't have time. Like, well, you're low in vitamin D, like you don't really have enough time to kind of get
to
that
do
into
anything about it. Right. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. And then you do have, we're going to get to this in a minute, but you do have different levels of testing. So there is the bronze level, which I know is more affordable. So maybe you could do 3 of the bronzes just to have that baseline. And then if there's any particular thing that you're looking to add on, you can always add on the additional, right?
Right. And you can, like you said, you can add on to the panel, so we can kind of customize them to some degree that way. But yeah, before your A race, that 6 to 8 weeks, I recommend a bronze panel. I don't think you need the gold panel all over again.
Right.
So the bronze is more of a check-in. So I would do gold at your baseline, and then the next subsequent ones could be bronze, because those are just going to look at kind of more the race specific markers that we're going to try to optimize.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Okay, cool. So inflammation, we talked about, that's a big one. I wanted to talk about adrenal fatigue just because that was something that I dealt with. And without blood work, we would have been guessing as far as what was wrong with me. So I, in 2007, basically came back from having a baby, and I just literally was so excited to get back to training that I drove my body like deep into this dark place. And my blood work just showed it. Like it showed like my cholesterol was down at 120 and I had like no energy. I was super skinny, and no matter how much I ate, I couldn't get weight on me. I had no energy. And so all my adrenal markers were super high. And without that blood work, the doctor's just guessing, right? So it was super important for me. So can you speak to like the markers for adrenal fatigue? Because that's a big one that triathletes are always dealing with.
Yeah, I think a lot of athletes, we're go-getters. And so it's really easy to drive ourselves into the ground, and we're kind of known to suffer, right? We kind of suck it up and push through, but there's definitely a place for working smarter, not harder. And so we want to make sure that you're not actually damaging your body and causing potentially permanent damage to it. So we see a lot of issues when it comes to, biomarkers with overtraining, and we can't diagnose anything, right? We're not a medical company, so we're not going to diagnose you with anything, including overtraining or adrenal fatigue. But we definitely see some commonalities and some symptoms along with, the overtraining that you were mentioning. And so we'll see your thyroid issues are pretty common in terms of like, you'll have really people usually get high cortisol, right?
Right.
And so it spikes, but then over time, it's like your body just kind of gives up and throws in the towel. And so then you end up with this really low cortisol. And you might think, oh, great, like the stress hormone is lower. And it's like, no, that is like a last ditch effort from
Right.
your body. It's
Yeah.
like starting to shut down. So
Right, you're out. I was basically out of cortisol is what happened. Like I ran out. I couldn't even do a yoga class. Like I was so fatigued. I was like, this is so pathetic. Like where's
Oh.
my, so yeah, so you're basically out of cortisol. And if I didn't stop training and address the issue, I could have created a disease that I could never come out of, right?
right. Yeah, your poor adrenal glands probably looks like raisins at that point.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you're taking care of your body so you can be competing and training for decades and years to come if you choose to.
Right.
And so if you, retire or take a step back, it's by choice and not, because
you're
you're
forced
forced
to,
to.
right. Exactly.
So we see a lot of issues with cortisol either being really high or very low, depending on where they are, kind of on that continuum.
Mhm.
Otherwise, thyroid, like I said, is another kind of telltale sign. And then your sex hormones will also be really low, whether you're male or female. Men will see really low testosterone, and that's also very common after intense, races or training. So my husband had a blood draw with ABT 2 weeks after he raced Ironman Whistler. And he actually raced as an age grouper in that, and he won his age group, but his blood work was like a total nightmare.
I'm sure.
So, and that was 2 weeks afterwards. So it does take a long time, it can take, months for your body to really recover. And that's why, prioritizing smart training like you guys do and the off season is so important, that you're not just grinding, 365.
Nonstop.
Yeah. So getting back to your point about the adrenals, that's a really important component to the training and how your body's going to respond. And with women particularly, if they're on hormonal contraceptives, so like birth control, that actually has a big impact on your cortisol levels as well as your overall stress response to exercise. So that's something that we take into consider. We have a new blood panel, the ABT She, which is female specific. And so with that, we ask, like, are you on hormonal contraceptive? Because with that, we want to know, is this an artifact of the birth control pills or patch or ring or whatever they're using? Or are there, is their stress response really that altered from their training? So these are important considerations that we take into play when we're analyzing the blood work, because like I said, you want to look at the whole picture and not just start to cherry pick specific markers.
Right. And so what do you see if someone is on birth control? Is it higher, or those markers higher or lower, or that you don't know? You just know that they're altered.
It's interesting. So the research shows that our stress response, if we're on a hormonal birth control, is really low. So we don't have that same stress response to exercise, which initially you might think, great, the exercise isn't stressing my body. No, it's like what the condition that you were in, where like your body is like not responding. Right. So that's something to consider. And, like I said, we don't give medical advice. And so, we'll work with, women who are on birth control to like get the most out of their training. Right. If that is, something that they're using. So it's just knowing that so we can work with it instead of just like, wondering what's going on.
And so I have to ask this question. So I am one of those athletes that has been in the sport for 23 years. I did recover completely. It did take me 18 months to come out of that place, but I've never been back there. Like, I know how to listen to my body. I know I'm not superwoman. I know I need 8 hours of sleep. I know I need a certain amount of fat and protein more than carbohydrates, but that's what works for me. But now I am 50, right? So menopause, right? So I'm learning a lot about menopause, and because my hormones are changing. Like, do you have any markers in the She thing for menopause?
Yes. So that's something that we really like to work with kind of the master athletes with, is menopause. It can be, or I like to call it puberty 2.0, because it's a similar situation, because it's kind of awkward. Like, you've never done this before. You're like, my body is changing. What's going on? Yeah. And so there are, specific hormone levels that we want to look for that can help us indicate where you are in that kind of menopausal journey. Because it's not like one day you're cycling and the next you're not. Right. It's just, it's a process that can take, months and potentially years depending on the woman. Yeah. So we can look to see, where are you potentially in that phase. And then knowing that, how do we periodize your training and your nutrition given your specific hormonal profile?
Okay, cool.
Because we're starting to get more and more research in this area. And so I'm all about helping athletes work smarter and not harder so
I
that
love
they
it.
can get the most out of their training and enjoy it too.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. This is really great information. And I do want to say that I have athletes that have used this service and, so thankfully they thought that they were done with triathlon because they just felt so bad. And it was a question of their iron, right? So iron is a big one, right?
Yes, yes, iron is huge. So this is a really common issue I see with most athletes is
Right.
issues with iron. And so when we look at your iron, we're looking at several different biomarkers. It's not just there isn't just an iron biomarker. There's a lot of components that go with it. And we'll spare the biochemistry lesson, but
Yeah.
we're really trying to figure out how is your body A absorbing iron and B, how is it using it? Because
Okay.
you're only as good as what you can absorb, right? So if
Right.
you're taking tons of cheap iron supplements and you're not absorbing any of it,
What's
it's
the
not
point?
going to be helpful. And so we
Right.
want to make sure that you're getting, the right form, the right amount, and in a way that your body can use it. And then how much are you using? Or if you're constantly pulling on those iron stores, we need to make sure that we're systematic about how to and strategic about how we can, replenish that iron store so that you're not constantly getting in the red with your iron.
Depletion, right. Okay, cool.
Exactly. Because your iron is kind of like your bank account, right? You want to make sure that there's a positive, and that if you're only spending money, eventually you're gonna run out. And so it's the same thing with the iron. We want to make sure that we're consistently replenishing that because anytime you're training, you're using that iron.
Yeah. Okay, good. So that's an important marker. And then I don't want to leave the guys out here. So we've already mentioned the testosterone thing.
Mhm.
Because I just feel like a lot of guys, especially the Ironman and the double Ironman athletes, they don't really realize how much they're training and they get addicted to the high of the training and they love the intensity. And, I'm a big fan and I force the issue of recovery and we have recovery weeks sometimes and people don't
Yeah.
like it. They're mad at me when they have to recover. Like it's an issue, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, but we're saving, this is important stuff. These guys need the testosterone and women do too.
Yeah, we do too.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it can be, frustrating because people think, well, there's nothing I can do if my testosterone is low. And that's also not true.
Yeah.
Obviously, we can't supplement directly with testosterone because it's illegal.
Yes.
It's also not very good for you,
No,
but
it's not.
you can, implement some strategies to help improve your testosterone. So one thing is correcting vitamin D deficiency. If you're low in vitamin D,
Yeah.
you are likely not going to have optimal testosterone levels. So we see with a lot of athletes when we get their vitamin D level optimized, their testosterone magically improves. So
Okay.
that's key. Another thing is making sure that they are, prioritizing recovery and rest, which I know is easier said than done. But making sure too that they're bookending their workouts with nutrition, right? So they're eating beforehand, during if it's longer, and then after. So research has shown that if you're consuming calories during the workout, it's less stressful on the body. And so that can help so your testosterone doesn't dip so much. And then also to just making sure that they're, getting enough sleep and managing mental stress too, because that, there's something called the allostatic load, which is your total stress on the body, whether that's from work, your relationship, your training,
Family.
school, whatever it is, it all adds up. And so if you can find non-physical activity that's enjoyable and calming for you, capitalize on that. So trying to find things, just, I say do something that's enjoyable, and they're like, "Well, I like running." I'm like, "Okay, not physical."
Yeah,
Do something that
exactly. So I call that working in. So we have working
love that.
in, like you have to work in as much as you work out. And so what I'll do is I'll do a track workout and then I'll do a yoga session with deep breathing and really slow movements and stretching. And I build some chi back, like I put a deposit back in with some slow moving breath work. And stretching, and my track workout does not seem as hard. Like I don't get as wasted from it, right? And so, I can't. I do want to bring up camp because camp is an opportunity. Ultimate Tri Camp is coming up on March 23rd, and we implement all the recovery after every single workout. We also implement all the nutrition components of before eating, during eating, and after eating. All the food is organic. We have it delivered every single morning to the campers. And it's just such a great way to capitalize on all this information without being so overwhelmed, because we're just doing it. Like it's a part of our daily life for the 6 days that we're at camp. So that's why
Yeah.
people love it, because they're training really, really hard. Don't get me wrong. It's an excellent way to up level and you get a huge amount of fitness, but we're doing the breath work. We're doing the ice baths. We're doing the recovery stretching and the breathing, you know, and the Kihara stretching every single day. So it's awesome. And now we're going to also talk about an opportunity where you guys are going to be with us at camp with one of my athletes, but we'll get to that in 1 minute. I just want to talk about the one more thing, magnesium and then cholesterol. And I think we're good. I want to keep this, you know, 30 minutes if we can. But let's talk about magnesium, because for me, magnesium, I actually, in my last blood work, it showed that I was magnesium deficient, and I take tons of magnesium, but it causes gastric distress. So I had to change the magnesium that I use. And now I love the magnesium I have. It's called Bioptimizers. And I don't get the runs like I used to. But a lot of my athletes are still struggling. Like they're taking the magnesium, they're actually putting it on topically as well, but they're still cramping. Like they're still having cramping. Do you have any idea of what that could be about, like absorption or?
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you're taking a good form of magnesium, because there are several out there and some of them are really cheap. So I would avoid like a magnesium oxide that just doesn't absorb very well. I would go for like a magnesium citrate is one that can be helpful, but like you said, if you overdose, you will get some GI distress, which is really uncomfortable. You only do that once and it's a lesson learned.
Yes.
Speaking from personal experience.
Me too.
But if you're doing it like, you know, just a little bit every day, then magnesium citrate is a good option. Otherwise, magnesium glycinate is another highly available, bioavailable form that your body absorbs and uses pretty well. And if you're doing, you know, a capsule or a gel, then that would be the way to go. I would avoid tablets. And this goes for any supplement. Avoid tablets, like the hard pressed, like pill things. There are so many binders in there. So if you're taking like a, you know, a vitamin or a supplement and it's a tablet, get rid of it, switch to like a capsule or like a liquid or a gel. Because those don't have those binders in there that are going to keep the nutrient in there, so you won't be able to absorb it. So
and then you just evacuate it and you don't even get the benefit of the vitamin. Right.
Exactly. So with magnesium can definitely help with cramping, but cramping is more than just magnesium. So that could be, you know, how are your fluid levels, right? How hydrated are you? Right. It's really easy to get dehydrated and we don't even realize it. Yeah. So taking a look at your urine, it should be like a light pale yellow. Okay. You don't want it to be totally clear, but you don't want it to be cloudy or yellow dark. Right. And so getting at least 4 of those light pale urines a day is key for kind of gauging hydration. Okay, cool. I like that. And then just, you know, loading up on those magnesium rich fruits and veggies can be helpful, because you're actually going to absorb a lot more than just taking a supplement. So taking a food first approach can be really helpful. So it sounds like at camp, you've got that nailed down.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of not having to take supplements if I can get it from my food. But honestly, we don't live on an organic farm and have these available to us, and we stress our bodies so much. And going back, you know, it's type A men and women, honestly, that are in the sport, and the stress levels are high outside of triathlon as well as inside triathlon. So, you know, these are all things to manage, and the magnesium is just a big one for a lot of my athletes. But I like looking at the other things that you can affect your cramping with, is the hydration and maybe even potassium and that kind of stuff too, right?
Yeah. Potassium is so key in terms of muscle function and, you know, nerve firing. And so you don't want to take a potassium supplement. So getting those from foods. And so potatoes are an excellent source. There's more potassium in a potato than bananas. And also like kiwi, but otherwise just general fruits and veg. Yeah, kiwi are fantastic. Again, more than a banana.
Okay, so awesome. Good to know.
General fruits and veggies are kind of a go-to for potassium and magnesium. They usually go together in nature.
Okay, awesome. I love that. Okay, cool. And then cholesterol. So cholesterol is like a hot topic because so many people think that cholesterol is bad, right? And they have it has a terrible negative connotation. And unfortunately, you go to the doctor and he's like, oh my God, your cholesterol is at 200 and the ratio is good, but your cholesterol is 200 total, and that's bad. And for me, when my cholesterol is less than 200, I don't function well. Like I don't feel good. I don't have energy. So cholesterol, I know, is very, very important for our brain function. But could you speak to the cholesterol situation?
Yes, absolutely. So cholesterol can be very controversial,
Yes.
and especially like in the medical community. But as athletes, it is so crucial. I mean, it's important for everyone, but it's especially important for us. The reason being, it is the building block for a lot of our hormones. So testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. If you don't have enough cholesterol, you are not going to have optimally functioning hormones or good levels there. And so, you have these athletes who are, worried about their cholesterol, and it's like, your body naturally makes cholesterol. Okay, it's made in the liver. And so whatever you don't consume, your body now has to make, which in some cases can be taxing or stressful on the body. So I tell people, unless you have like genetic predisposition for high cholesterol, you don't need to worry about cholesterol in your food. It does not translate to cholesterol in your blood.
Thank you. You guys hear that?
Yes. So like you don't need to be fearing, eggs or, meat, and everyone has their own dietary preferences.
Right,
And so it's like, I respect that. And so I just want people to be informed though, that cholesterol in food does not equate to cholesterol in blood. And they've done several studies showing that. And so usually it's a
So if you eat egg yolks and avocado and raw nuts, that is not going to translate as higher cholesterol in your blood work.
No, in fact, some higher cholesterol foods can actually lower blood cholesterol. So, and there are such important nutrients in foods that have cholesterol that, again, the benefits far outweigh any potential risk of, what could happen if you're consuming large amounts. And really, like I said, the only concern would be is if you have like a genetic predisposition or underlying cause that could, cause you to have higher cholesterol. But otherwise, for like in egg yolks, they're a great source of phosphatidylcholine, which is a really important compound for brain function and neurotransmitters. Yeah. So again, like no single food is good or bad. And so the more variety and diversity you can get in your diet, the overall better health that you can have from a holistic standpoint.
I love that. Thank you so much for reinforcing what I already talked about. Okay, so we do have a question. May have missed the beginning, but what are the main blood markers measured in the ATB? Okay, so athlete blood test. You can actually go to their website, athletebloodtest.com. It's ABT, not ATB. And how is this different or analyzed different from a blood test from a doctor? So why don't you speak to how that works?
Great question. Yes. So if you hop on the website, each panel, it'll show you what it includes.
Yes, you have the bronze, you have tell us the different ones you have.
Yeah. So the bronze is kind of like our check-in point. So that would be like the 6 to 8 weeks before your A race. The gold panel is our most common, and that is very comprehensive. That's going to be your baseline. So this has a lot of different information, and they're all broken down into sections. So there's hydration, there's, training tolerance, and like all these different components. And then you also have the platinum panel, which is the gold panel paired with genetic testing.
Okay.
So this is where like, you're like, I wonder if I have that cholesterol, that would be an option. Right. And then we have our newest, which is ABT-SHE, and that is the gold panel in addition to female sex hormones. And that also is going to take into account other components such as like your birth control methods or your natural cycle and that sort of thing. So if you are a female, then you are not through menopause yet, I highly recommend the ABT-SHE panel, because I think you're going to get a lot more value in sense of now it's taken into account more variables. Right. But in terms of how is it different than a doctor, this is a great question, because if you go to the doctor, they're looking for two things in your blood. One is disease and one is deficiency.
Right.
And so if you go, they're going to be like, hey, you know what? Your iron level is just fine. You're fine. You're not anemic. That's great. Well, they're comparing you to the general population that's sedentary. And so, yes, maybe your iron is sufficient to sit during the day, but that does not mean that it's sufficient to be getting you through an Ironman or training block or, your training regimen. And so with athlete blood tests, we're not looking for disease or deficiency. We are looking for where are you relative to like an optimal range. So athlete blood test was started by a group of professional triathletes who were curious about how their training was impacting their biomarkers and their blood levels. Right. So it's a very organic company. And, from there, we've built, tens of thousands of data points looking at, your gender, your sport, your training level, and then comparing that specifically to people within your group, or a cohort, as it's called in science. And so, specifically, are you optimized in these different nutrients or these different biomarkers to perform at your best? So we're not looking, are you going to die from something, or are you super low? We're looking at, how do we get you into that ideal range so you are physiologically primed to do your best?
Right. Okay.
So
I love
that's
that.
so yeah, so that's the difference. And that's why we say, like, I wouldn't recommend going to the doctor, because they're just going to tell you, for the blood work, is because they're not looking for the same things that we are in terms of like their performance. And they're also, unless they're a sports medicine doctor, they're not trained to be looking for marker levels that are ideal for sports performance. And they're
Right.
very different than just like general health and sports performance.
Right. Okay, cool. So really good stuff. So yeah, so I was always taught, or when I was in my education about blood work, when you go to the normal doctor, they're, like you said, they're looking for disease and stuff like that. But they're also, all their numbers are, and their ranges, their good ranges are based on the entire population. Okay. So if you go into the middle of Walmart and look around, that's normal. Okay.
Yes.
And you don't want to be normal. You do not want to be normal. You want to be like top 5%. And I feel like that's where Athlete Blood Test is looking at athletes and then their markers compared to other athletes doing similar things. And that's where we're trying to get optimum blood work numbers, right?
Yes, we only work with athletes, hence the name Athlete Blood Test. We don't do general population blood work, because we are looking specifically at your sport, at your training load, and then we're comparing you within that. So we're not comparing you to some, I don't know, hockey player, right? It's going to be very specific to you, and what's going to be best.
Okay, cool. And then also, oh man, I lost the question. It was right in my head. But okay, so let's talk about camp real quick, because I have an athlete who actually is coming to camp. She lives in Texas, so I don't get to work with her on a daily basis. So I'm super excited for her to be there. And she asked, which would we recommend her maybe doing the blood work beforehand, and then us analyzing it while we're at camp, so you can have our athletes who are at camp can have some real world application to a real person. So
yeah.
That's definitely something we could do. Because how does it work? So you send a prescription, you sign up, you pay, and then you send a prescription, and we just take it to the lab, and then you can get the blood work done, right?
So it's super easy. If you go on athletebloodtest.com, you sign, pick which one you want, you pay for it, and then you can go to any lab. There's like a lab finder. You just type in your zip code. And there are usually several in the area. I think there are like 8 around where I live. You might need an appointment now because of COVID, but pre-COVID, you didn't even need an appointment. You can just show up. Takes about 10 minutes, right? Walk in, get your blood drawn, leave. And then you will get an email from us when your report is ready. And then you get to log into your portal and then see the report. And then if people want further follow-up, I can work with them in terms of like kind of tailoring their nutrition based on their blood work to get them where they want to be. Because it can be hard to just look at specifics, say like, oh, you're low in folate, and be like, okay, well, what do I do? Right.
Yeah, so that's gonna help too. So I can help too.
So I would love to sit down with you guys at camp virtually. Unfortunately, I can't be there. And yeah, we could go through her report, and you can kind of see, 1, what it looks like, and 2, then how do you kind of take the next steps, and where does the rubber meet the road?
Right. Yeah, and it's really cool. The report, I mean, I remember my report. It's like you have a gradient, right? And you're either in the negative or the positive, and you have your ideals, but it is based on athletes. And then just to point out, if there is something wrong, you would tell the person.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And so when I said, like, we're not looking for deficiencies, if you're, low, we will let you know. And we're very clear. There's an action point, there's overall general comments, but then there's action points, and we will literally tell you, this is what we want you to do. And we're specific. So instead of saying, hey, I want you to take a vitamin D supplement, we will say, I take this many IUs, this many days a week, this form.
Right.
So you're not left guessing.
And the good news is Full Circle athletes do have a 20% off discount code. So if you guys are part of Full Circle coaching, you guys already get that. So yeah, so we will be sending that out to our athletes. Oh, and one more thing, I do want to mention tablets, the tablets thing. There is a product that I use on a daily basis called Perfect Amino, and it is a tablet. However, it does not have any magnesium stearate coating. So it breaks down into our bloodstream like within 20 minutes. So that's a little bit different. But you always want to look at the ingredients of your vitamins. And if it says there are fillers, like if the ingredient is vitamin D and it says like 10 different things, you know, that might not be the best supplement for you, especially if it's a tablet, right?
Yeah, and so when there are some tablets that might be okay in terms of like, you know, you mentioned the amino one. Otherwise, like tablets that you add to your water, like the electrolyte tablets, like
Yes.
those would be okay.
Right.
But I'm
They
thinking
break up.
more like vitamin type supplements that
Yeah.
you would want to avoid the tablet form.
Yeah, and work with something that's more absorbable. Okay, cool. I don't
Yes.
think there's any more questions. So, but if there are, you guys, you can post them underneath the video in Facebook, and we can reach out, and I can reach out to Anna, and she can help me reply if I don't know the answer. But I'm super excited. This is so helpful and so needed for all of our athletes. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
I'm just so excited for you guys, and I hope you guys have a great training here. And camp is in a month. That's exciting. But otherwise, yeah, I'm around too. If people have questions, I'm on Instagram, Dr. Anna Roby. Otherwise, ADT.com is the athlete blood test account on Instagram, and we'll post recipes and discount codes every once in a while and stuff. So
Okay, cool.
thank you.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. Nice to meet you. I haven't met you before, so I look forward to
Yes.
more of these. So maybe we can do this again in the summer and then the fall, just to help remind people of the importance of testing, especially as they get closer to their A race. But it was a real pleasure. We learned a lot, and I hope you have an awesome day. I'll talk
Thanks.
to you
You
soon.
too.
All right,
Bye.
take care, Anna. Bye.